if you've been paying attention to what's happening all around the world, but specifically in, they call it Venezuela now, especially in Ottawa, we see that the systems are specifically targeting individuals that the powers that be do not like. Once again, nothing to do with order, nothing to do with facts or evidence. They just target those they are displeased with. And this is a system we've seen throughout time: despotism, tyranny, dictatorship, whatever you want to call it. Okay, we've seen these things arise again and again. Now, a lot of normies and NPCs are a little bit surprised that it could happen in Venezuela or Kazakhstan, whatever you want to call it, but it's not. This is something very basic. It is inside each and every one of us, and we need to understand that it's there. Otherwise, it will manifest itself and possess people to do these horrible actions. With all that said, I found this very interesting thread. Punk6529. Actually, I don't even know who this person is. Oh my, he's got almost 300,000 followers. He's not just a... Okay. So let's look at this. There are no other constitutional rights in substance without freedom to transact. Being meaning to write this for 6 months, but the Canadian response to the trucker protest is illustrating this so vividly that today is the day. And he has some assumptions that we can agree that constitutional democracies are a better form of government than others. Okay, sure, people have fundamental rights. People are innocent until proven guilty. The state cannot punish people without due process. If you disagree with this, there's not much to talk about. Now, freedom of speech might require such things as a whole bunch of stuff: websites, pamphlets, all of which cost money. Freedom of assembly, taking a train, booking a hotel, getting a taxi, buying food, all of which cost money. Freedom of religion, you have to get the church, right? You want to have communities and events and buying food and paying people, all cost money. The exercise of rights costs money. Historically, the risk of financial censorship has been much lower because for literally the entirety of human history until about 2001 with the Unpatriotic Act, it was mostly uncontroversial that people could have decentralized, non-custodial mediums of exchange. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans used commodity money, shells, gold. In the last few hundred years, we have had various forms of paper currency. Over the last 20 years, the institutional environment has shifted, though, to a posture that non-custodial money is default suspicious. I'll try to explain it easily here. If you don't use the normie systems that are popularized by the parasitic class, that is deemed suspicious. Well, hey, why are you walking around with cash? You can have everything on a credit card, or you can pay through some digital processing app. Why would you carry cash? And now that if you carry cash, people will go, well, that's weird. Is it weird? Well, they say that the goal is to prevent money laundering. If you have to use their financial systems, the SWIFT system or whatever it is as an example, the banking system, well then, we can prevent money laundering and stop terrorism and tax evasion. Okay, that's technically true, but we all have to understand that that is not the primary motive, right? There are arms deals being conducted by nations and other ne'er-do-wells. We have all this money printing going on by the alleged government agencies or central banks, and those are just unfettered. They just do whatever the hell they want. But if you don't declare $100 or something like that, well, then you're a terrorist or something. The problem, however, there's both a short-term and long-term goal creep. I think this is just the reality. You know, you give somebody an inch, and over time, they're going to take more than just an inch. This is considered undemocratic. If a country would like to make pornography or guns or cryptocurrency illegal, it has every right to pass laws to do so. Then the citizens can re-elect or de-elect the politicians. I'm not sure if this is true, because you could argue that cryptocurrency is a kind of currency or money. And in that sense, if you're saying that the government's trying to put a stranglehold on resources, and they put a stranglehold on cryptocurrency, I think that's very similar, if not exactly the same. What happens instead is hidden deep bureaucracy type BS, where the banks point to the regulators and say, well, they told us to call high-risk accounts. The net effect is that you don't have a bank account anymore, and there's no recourse, no due process, not even an actual law that says you should not have an account. which is apparently what is happening in Venezuela right now. I'm hearing stories, and once again, there's stories. I don't know if it's true or not, but people are saying that, well, they can't have access to their account, and they haven't done anything illegal. They haven't been served with a warrant. There isn't a criminal complaint. There's nothing. And they're just frozen out of their account. Now, it could be an error, but when the government has come out and said, we are going to target people financially and make it so you can't access your funds, it doesn't sound like a coincidence. It sounds like they're doing exactly what they set out to do. And once again, no due process, no evidence. This is the most startling thing. Remember, with terrorists and whatever, usually in the past, right, there's a connect. Oh, we saw them transfer $80 million from North Korea to this guy's bank account. Okay, well, that looks like evidence, right? Oh, you donated $20 to some fundraiser thing. Well, then you're a terrorist. Like, does that make any sense? Even in the current system, being unbanked and having to rely on cash is more or less ejecting you from the modern economy. I know a lot of people, they like to use cash, and that number is dwindling as time goes on. Even with cash, you can't do a lot of stuff. Yeah, you can go to a store, you can buy a burger if you show your medical records as an example in many places. But the point is that you can't really interact in the modern economy. You cannot buy stocks, you can't do lots of stuff. You can't do internet banking. There's just so much stuff. You can't transfer funds to your friend. Like if your friend paid or paid for a meal and you want to pay them back through some sort of app like that, you can't do it. Yeah, you have cash. You might have paper currency in a physical, tangible form. But if you can't deposit it into one of these normal financial instruments, you're essentially cut off. But guess what? It gets worse. Many central banks have stated they want to eliminate cash, allow global transaction censorship, and apply negative interest rates. And we already have negative interest rates, by the way. We already have negative interest rates. They claim that they don't. Like, you put money in an account, you get like 0.002% or some ridiculously low number. Inflation's like 40%. According to official government numbers, you look at their M4 numbers, it's like 40%, 50%, depending on where you live. That's how much new currency they have borrowed into existence. So even based on the own government's numbers, your return is like negative 39.999% or something. So it's already negative. The fact that it's not nominally negative doesn't mean it's negative. A system of this kind would be the most powerful system of centralized control the world has ever known. Even Stalin, Hitler, and Mao did not have the ability to apply global transaction censorship across their empires at the touch of a button. What will happen is some aspiring dictator, aspiring? You mean it's not already happened? Will censor their opponents, spending during an election period, and they won't even be able to buy a tomato, let alone run a campaign. With such power and no due process is a certainty. Power-hungry people tend to run for office. This is where we're at. This is not something that's going to come down the line 5 years, 20 years. It's already here. Now, this is nothing new, by the way. It's been happening for decades and for centuries. You think a lot of these African nations, or in South America, or in lots of places where corruption is high, you think they've been having fair elections? Of course not. Of course they're not having fair elections. And even if you have allegedly fair elections, like we allegedly have in the Western world, is it really fair if the government can give billions of dollars to the fake news and the fake news just keeps slandering and defaming opponents of the government? I mean, that's not fair either, right? But that's the world we live in. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a deeply corrupted, fallible, and screwed up system. And it's up to people to recognize that and try to fix it. It's not, oh, well, that's just the way it goes. Notice that the third goal is mission creep. Nobody started this process in 2001 saying the goal is to be able to apply negative interest rates to your savings. Below a certain negative rate, people will withdraw their money. Well, people are already doing that in Kazakhstan, apparently. Most of the presumption of innocence is turning into presumption of guilt. Why do you want to withdraw so much cash? If you have nothing to hide, why do you need non-custodial instruments? Non-custodial is dangerous. We've seen this, right? Oh, well, Ethereum is dangerous and Bitcoin. And I'm not even saying cryptocurrency is the solution to this. I don't know. I'm not well versed in those areas. But the fact that the mainstream keeps saying, oh, cryptocurrency is a sign of white supremacy or something like that. Or, oh, if your friend carries a lot of cash around, they might be a radical something or other. Why are they doing that, right? Because they want all of your resources in such a way that they can control them. I remind you that literally for the whole of human history, non-custodial was the main form of mediums and exchange. Yeah, bartering, and people, like, they had wood and like shells and all that stuff. This is one reason why cryptos have been generally disliked by central banks in particular. So back to constitutional rights. In theory, you have rights. You need resources to exercise them. The state acquires the power to cut off your resources. Do you see where the problem is? At which point I present to you the liberal primate. What is this? Anyways. So, the Prime Minister has a political problem. Truckers have blocked some roads and things like that. And he goes on to explain it. He says, like, I don't really know much about the trucking situation. Now, what would a normal constitutional democracy political response to be to this situation? Let it play out if you think it is in good faith. Encourage local authorities to arrest them and try them in court if you think it's in bad faith. That's it. Either is fine. Either is fine. Remember, if you actually have a working legal system, then these are the two options available. When you go to court in democracy, you are innocent until proven guilty. The state has to be specific about which law you have broken. The state has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, normally. Now, this is annoying and difficult. But what you have in Kazakhstan today is not that. They just say that it's an emergency, even though nothing's been damaged, other than maybe some egos. I'm even willing to stretch to say, okay, maybe it was correct to invoke the act, but let's see what he plans to do with it. What was done with the act made my jaw drop, however. It is my, this might happen in the future scenario, but today. Canada has every single financial system provided from banks to credit companies to investment firms to freeze accounts, anyone directly or indirectly supporting the protest. I don't even know what that means. Given the powers of the Emergency Act, there is no due process. And there's no liability if the banks or financial institutions do it. Usually, if any private business violates your rights or something, you'd have some legal recourse. You'd sue them, right? Something like this. Right now, you can't do that. They'll just say, well, the government told me to. I don't have an option. So you don't even have a way to get back at the government to seek justice or recourse, and you can't get the private institutions either. The goal is to shut down the protest by nuking the protesters' financial infrastructure. This is not a model of criminal justice I expect to see in a constitutional democracy. Even worse, indirect supporters. This is fuzzily defined in press releases. It might include crowdfunders, but it might also include a family member who sends money to someone protesting in order for them to buy a meal. They're being treated as terrorist financiers. I mean, you think about this. If you literally give a cup of coffee to a guy on the street in Ottawa, because you see him there and he's kind of cold looking, like, hey, I'll buy you a cup of coffee, and that's it? Are you a terrorist financier? Well, according to the way the current system works, yeah, you could be. And they could freeze your account and be like, dude, I paid like $1 or something for coffee. Oh, terrorist. Now, the claim about them being terrorists is not really true, right? What is the real risk is that constitutional rights will be curtailed. Will be curtailed? They've been curtailed for 2 years. You know, this sort of, hey, it'll happen in the future, Canada's the canary in the gold mine. Some of those things are true. But what you have to understand is that this is going to occur worldwide unless people reject it. It's that simple. Would you feel the same way Donald Trump was freezing all the financial infrastructure of BLM? It's a terrible precedent to set. In politics, you must always, always, always invert. If you invert, you might be honest. That's called a principle. But like what this thread had already mentioned, those that run for office are very power hungry. Almost universally. Not 100%, but close to 100% of the time. So you get the worst individuals that are trying to vie for power. The way to judge an idea is not if your team in power should do it. The way to judge is if you think your worst political enemy had that power, would you feel comfortable with that? It is a mistake to roll out these kinds of infrastructure for political protesters and indirect supporters. I have only been discussing the immediate term effects. The long-term effects will be worse. I suspect without explicit action, many of the people unbanked will now not be rebanked because financial institutions won't want the headache of doing so. This is not a short-term thing, but an uncertain duration ejection from the financial system. No banking, no credit cards, no investments, no insurance. For truckers, that means no job. This type of punishment requires due process. We don't have due process. It's a banana republic. It's despotism. Yes, it has clowns. Yes, right? It has fireworks and it has all the right lingo and, oh, it's all white supremacists or something like that. This has been going on for a long time. This can get so much worse, though. It will end with no cash, no non-custodial crypto, so government-controlled crypto, full control digital currency. Yep. And they might say we would never abuse this power. Well, we've already seen it abused immediately in Canada. Every day, every month, every year, I'm here to say the same thing. The internet, computers, big data, machine learning allow us to centralize the information flows in a way that we could never have had before. It's exciting, but also dangerous. It's critically important that we don't sleepwalk into this. But what about criminals? Do you think I don't worry about criminals? Criminals are smart, can read the plan. If you centralize the greatest honeypot of power and money in history, what do? The really smart criminals won't be running around robbing banks. They will aim for corporate and political leadership. Then they can win everything. Too long didn't read. Financial systems underpin everything, including rights. Weaponizing this system is a terrible precedent. We must preserve non-custodial wallets at all costs. So a great thread. Just want to add this. I don't know if this is true. Look at this. I just got off the phone with the bank after I couldn't buy anything from Amazon. Turns out all my cards are frozen because they think I'm one of the truckers. WTF, I voted for liberals and I'm boosted. They're saying I have the same name as one of the Nazis truckers. And by the way, I don't know if this is true or not. I could not find the original tweet. So it is possible that this is fake. It's also possible that it was tweeted out, the screenshot was taken, right? And then this guy deleted the tweet. I don't know. But the essence of this is absolutely true. We now have a whole bunch of people in Canada and the US. I've read dozens of stories of people saying that they're getting locked out of accounts. Is that the world you want to live in? Where simply spending your money in a way that, by the way, it wasn't illegal when the money was donated. Right? It's like retroactive punishment. That's what's happening here. That's another issue. So it wasn't a crime to donate to these fundraisers, whatever you want to call them. But then after the fact, they say, oh yeah, now we're going to lock down all your accounts. And not only that, they might get the wrong people. I've heard of family members also not being able to do it. So you might have a cousin and they're not able to access their bank account for even though it's completely unrelated to you. This is the act of a despot. That's all it is. And anybody cheering it on, I know a lot of people are concerned, lots of people are oblivious. They're not oblivious. They're weak. It's a little bit different. Probably in society, there's about a third, 30% or so of people that will always toe the government line. Like, you cannot convince them with facts, evidence, reality. Nothing will get them to change their mind until they are physically having big problems. Like, if they can't eat food, if they can't do what they need to do, then they might say, at that point where they don't have food or something, then they might wake up, but only because they're hungry, not because they understand any principles. So don't waste a lot of time on people that can't be reasoned with. You just got to talk to the people that are kind of on the fence. They know something's wrong. Spend more time and resources on those people and try to get them awake. But this is the reality. Without due process, without a standard, the government can declare you a combatant. They can declare you as evil and the wrong person whenever they want, willy-nilly, and you have no recourse. So anybody who's still saying, well, Canada's still roughly free or something like that, they don't know what's happening. They don't know what's happening. And this is a test run, I believe, for other nations. Because if it can occur in Canada, it can occur anywhere. It can occur anywhere. Now, the short-term damage in Canada will probably be, when I say short-term, is that a lot of international institutions are going to pull out their money. People are pulling their money out of banks. A lot of people are pulling their money out of the country. It's the same thing that I saw in Hong Kong. A lot of companies said, well, we're just going to move our headquarters to Singapore or Japan, right? About more than 1% of the population of Hong Kong left last year. They emigrated. So that's a big drain on the economy. And the same thing is going to start happening in Canada unless this gets rectified very quickly. If this lingers on for weeks or months, you're just going to see a steady outflow of capital. They will not stay in Canada. And it doesn't have anything to do with the truckers necessarily. You don't have to support the truckers to understand that you don't want your accounts frozen for no reason. Just because, hey, they just click on your account and boom, now you can't access it. Do you want to live in a country like that? Do you want to invest in a country like that? Of course not. But this is where it's all headed. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll see you all in the next video.